Hey guys, welcome to this video. Thank you for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome, and welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. I just want to roll right into a little energy update and then maybe share a little play with words or channeling that comes through. Okay, so the first thing I want to share is I did a video 2 videos ago, approximately, and I just spoke about grief. And I think this is going to be a topic. It's funny because I talked about grief and then I shared a couple of other people's posts on Instagram. One of them, I can't remember who it was right now. I'll try to find it and link it up. I always forget to add the links in these videos, so apologies. But I shared it on my stories on Instagram. It might have been quantum feedback or something like that. Either way, they posted all about grief. And whenever there's something that's going on in a collective experience, we tend to, it's an individual experience, so each of us deal with grief in different ways. But many of us, I won't speak for everyone, many of us are in this stage of grief. We're in the stages of grief. And I talked about that in more detail at the end of that video. So if you feel guided to check that out, you may find it helpful, or maybe someone who's experiencing it. I do intend to do more videos on this topic. I have a friend, Jess at Yothera, who knows a lot about this, as well as a few of my other friends, that we tend to weave in certain perspectives around grief and how it can be integrated, processed, and experienced in the most supportive way for us and ourselves and for each other. So that's going to be an ongoing theme, and I wanted to reiterate that in the beginning of this video, because if you look up the 5 stages of grief, which we could go into in more depth, and I've been experiencing them throughout the day, and I don't necessarily go through all 5 stages every time I grieve over something. So for example, I have someone who I care about very much. She's just a lovely lady. Her husband passed away so it's sad. And I grieve for her and her family. And I had tears. I'm still a little emotional. And there's a lot of that right now. There's a lot of people who it's not just from our friend, the entity, and some people's obviously not friend, Corvid, but it's also other things, life. It's heart attacks, strokes, it's cancer. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why someone leaves this earth plane. So sometimes when we're in it directly, so she might be experiencing the stages of denial all the way through to acceptance, right? And I can't remember all the stages right now, but it's not. Look it up if you feel guided to. And it's important to ask ourselves throughout the day, am I feeling any of these things? How am I feeling? Check in with ourselves. The ongoing theme is getting back into our bodies and embodying and being aware of our emotions and our feelings so that they can be integrated, so they can be digested. Maybe this is just going to be an energy update, and I'll do I'll pause and do a second video on the flow. So being aware of where we're at and if we're experiencing these, because sometimes it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to not talk about it and to go within so that we can process and digest. And some people need to pull away and just do self-care. Other people need a friend. And so being aware of where we are at then assists us to assist others in processing their own grief. But we can't help others unless we are able to help ourselves. I mean, we can, but then it's depleting our own charge, right? Then it creates sometimes a disconnect from ourselves, and it also can create a energy depletion. And sometimes we might be in a place of depression, and yet we're still able to help others if we're in that place, but obviously not to our fullest ability, especially if we don't recognize that's where we're at. So for example, more and more often, this has to do with us learning how to pay attention to what our body wants, right? We talk about this with food. I've talked about this in a lot of videos. but it's also recognizing where we're at. So when our friend asks us, hey, do you want to go to that party tonight? Or, hey, I wanted to take this road trip, and you are in a place of complete depression, but you don't realize it. It's acknowledging, that's not where I'm at right now. What I need to do is sleep, treat my body well, go get massages, go to the beach, and just be with me for a while. Or it could be that hasn't worked and you're still in a state of depression. So it's acknowledging that that's in front of me. I love Jason Estes talks about that a lot. What's in front of you. And maybe that's an opportunity for you to move out of that cycle and connect with somebody else on a human level that can not necessarily fix your problems or solve them for you, but offers a vibrational change in order to open the doors of clarity so that we have a different perception than what we had 5 minutes ago when we were in a complete state of despair or depression. So sometimes it's just about stopping and asking ourselves, what would feel good right now? Or we may not even know what would feel good right now because we're in it, right? So then it's just allowing the universe to provide us with opportunities to work through that, to integrate it, and to feel into what our next step is. What are the possibilities? Where could I go with this? So I just wanted to kind of share that was one thing that's still coming through in almost every session, in many conversations, and I'm seeing it across the board. I think I mentioned I shared on Instagram a great post that somebody did about grief. So kind of get to know a little bit about that if you don't already, if that's something you feel guided to look at, because I also was guided to add to that. And I did talk about this in a previous video, the 2 videos ago. So I did a lot of stuff in that video if you feel guided to go back and watch that. But I'm seeing different stages. So even you might not fit in those 5 stages. There's other sub bubbles that come up from this, but it's still a form of processing grief. And so I'll be doing more videos on this with some sisters of mine to kind of share different perspectives so that they can explain it a little differently than how I've been able to explain it. The second thing I wanted to discuss was I've been hearing that we're getting, so many of us are getting 2 things on the flip side, moving past the grief. And so we're processing this while at the same time, many of us are becoming fully activated or activating or expanding more. And while we're processing all this stuff, so that can be challenging if we're not making the connection. Right? So this is where getting into the body and connecting into our reality so how do I address this? I had a session where I was shown that this beautiful light worker that I'm working with is about to pop. Like her pineal gland, she may be going through a massive awakening very soon. So thank you for this, because whenever I work with someone, it can be useful for the collective. So we're all doing this together. We have these beautiful, enlightening conversations, or we have this experience, and then when we share those experiences with others, it might just be one little piece of information that somebody else needed to hear, or that we needed to hear, and it's just that click and that aha to go, oh, maybe that's what happened to me the other day. So I had the vision of something happening to her that was very similar to something that will be happening, that happened to me, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't know when, doesn't matter. So if you guys have watched the videos before, this is redundant, but for those who may not know, I had this massive awakening, 4 or 5 years ago, I think, right around there. And it's been a couple different runs. It wasn't like it was only happened once. It's been pieces. I have a tendency to be full throttle and just say, all right, listen, whatever I need to work through, bring it on and just show it to me. And the universe is like, here you go. And I think in a past life regression, I called myself full throttle Betty. Like, I'm in it to win it, so let's just bring it, and I can handle it. And then all of a sudden it gets brought, and I'm like, oh man, this is a lot, right? And that's what happened to me. I'm going to just share a dear friend of mine. So I know I'm kind of going all over the place, but I'm going to tie this together. A dear friend of mine, Kat, was like, I think something just happened in my pineal gland yesterday. So I'm seeing now a pattern. I think there's a lot of people that are going to be experiencing these little activations, but some of them are not going to be little, is what I've been shown. So for one, I'll go back to this client of mine and friend. She may be experiencing a massive kundalini or pineal pop, is what I call it. Now, if I think of pop, it leads me into so many different plays on words, so I'll do that in the next video. I'm hearing pop harmonics, pop signature. Okay, I guess I'm gonna do it in this video. Pop frequency, and I'm hearing also this has to do with computer linguistics. So it's gonna change for me, I literally heard, it sounded like a bone cracking, but also a pop at the same time. And that happened to me, I want to say, and I could be mistaken, but I want to say it was maybe 3 times it happened within a very short period of time. One being the largest sound I've ever heard. I described it to my friend as like lightning when it hits a, what's it called? I can't think of the name right now, but it doesn't matter. When lightning hits and it's like that kaboom, that's what it felt like inside my head. One time that happened and I literally astral projected in that moment. Another time it happened, there was just this light that just came through. And another time it happened and I really thought it was outside of my body, but it was inside my body. So I'm just sharing these different personal experiences because it's different for a lot of people. So this particular light worker that I was working with, hers might be big. So I want to talk about that. My dear friend, Kat, hers was little, but she told me specifically, and I want to share this, so thank you for allowing me to share this message, that she's asked for it to happen in whatever she can handle. So she set her intention going into this with awareness that she wants to fully open and expand, but doing it in a safe way. So making the small adjustments that are needed so it's more comfortable and less, like mine, Full Throttle Betty. I was like, bring it on, and then I ended up sick, really sick. So as I recognize sickness though, I was sick, but that wasn't because I was sick. And I'm being guided to talk about that. It was because it literally was a cracking of my reality. And I'm going to lead into the next information that's coming through about breaking our mind. It literally broke my mind and broke my body so that I could put myself back together. Humpty Dumpty. And in doing that, what happened was it flooded my entire sensory system. And there are people who have had is it called, guys, I'm a little mushy today. Lots of information, lots of downloads. Brain mush is a thing. Everything broke apart so that it could be revealed what was there. So that I could then clear, dissolve, transmute, integrate all of these aspects of me and all of these aspects that weren't really me that I thought were me. They all came up for me. They came up for me in dream time, in synchronicity, in conversation, and you hold it in your body. I had held a lot of stuff in my body and in my system. And it took me about a year of working through this. It doesn't have to be that way for everybody though. That's how I chose to experience and express it. Some people have a Kundalini activation that all of a sudden you're on. And it's hard. What I call it, I like to use the word bleed through. There are bleed throughs in timelines. And that happens from my experience. When we have these activations, sometimes we get a bleed through where there's no boundaries. So all of a sudden we don't have these boundaries because everything's coming in all at once. Our body is sharing things with us. Our intuition is coming on. I'm getting goosebumps. We're hearing messages from our guides. We're hearing messages from things that aren't necessarily that are not necessarily all sunshine and rainbows. We're picking up on the hidden layers. And this can cause sometimes people to go into shock, is what I'm being told to say. When I say I'm being told to say, I'm being invited to use that as an example. It's me that I'm connecting with in this now moment. I connect with a collective of energy. And this collective of energy is tied into the multidimensionality of me. And we're all doing this. So the difference is now I've created less of a separation. I still say my guides and I still say they, we, because it's this soup, this collective energy of multiple frequencies and aspects of myself from one perspective. Anyways, so what happens is sometimes it just comes online and it's hard to shut it off. So people go into shock. They either shut down and go into denial, which takes me back into the first stage of grief, or they can't embody. They're all over the place. For me, I was all over the place. I was embodying, but it was difficult for me to have a normal conversation. And my friends who did the best they could to support me saw that I was I was seeing things out of the peripheries of my eyes. I was seeing things when laying in bed. I would see, and this is where my guidance team was like, Carrie, you don't need to see all of that all at the same time, because it's very distracting. It's very difficult to focus on what I need to focus on because there is no focus, because the wide angle lens is taking in everything. And we think we want that sometimes, but that makes it difficult to have a human experience and do our day-to-day daily activities. So, especially if you have children, it's like you have to be there for your kids while you're going through your own unique individual expression of this awakening process. So I'm sharing this because I'm seeing this, actually, this has come up several times in session. And now my dear friend is bringing it to my awareness that she's experiencing this, but she's not experiencing it from that. I'm going to get to that one next. So again, set our intention. One suggestion is set our intention with how we'd like to receive this. And from my own experience, it isn't, I wanted it all at once because I just wanted to get through it. And I had a lot of stuff that I had to get through. But if you've had a lot of trauma and you haven't processed all of that trauma, whatever that trauma may look like for you, just be aware that sometimes when we have these spontaneous activations, it's like spontaneous combustion. So that's why it's even more important for us to be stabilizing our frequencies and doing the work so that we don't get lost in translation, so that we don't get lost in trying to translate what is happening to us, so that we don't get lost in the translation and we're not paying attention to what we really need to, which is right in front of us. So just to be aware of that, that was kind of my journey, and it was a challenging time of my life for sure. And I think I chose to experience it that way because I could share it with you guys. So I gave some practical pieces of advice for this particular individual and kind of shared with her what I saw this was going to lead into in the next stage of her advancement. But that's just from another perspective because it could change, by the way. We are constantly changing and making adjustments to our reality right now. So we are making a lot of reality adjustments, and this means that certain things we thought were going to happen are not going to happen, and certain things we didn't think were going to happen are going to happen. And it's about us being able to stabilize our frequency while these adjustments are made and fine-tuned. Because if we're not listening to our own tune, our own signature frequency, because we just blew the lid off of our reality, and I'm going to do another video on that, then we then come into what's called schizophrenia. So it's a schism, and it splits us into all of these different realities because many of us are accessing this quantum field, and it's a lot. So I'm being guided to share with everybody, bring it in, rein it in, tune into you. We're getting a lot of downloads and messages, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do anything right now, that we have to translate them right now, that we have to fully understand why or where they're coming from. Take it in smaller increments, write it down, record what's coming through. And it's exciting and it's fun and it can be scary. But again, if we have trauma that we haven't processed, when this happens, it's possibly going to bring up a major fear. And that's something we haven't necessarily processed. We can become afraid of these abilities, and we can become afraid of the entities. And I call entity just a living being. That's it. That are now showing themselves to us, or better spoken, we are now able to see, that have been there the whole time, but now we have eyes to see. So it becomes this very strange world and reality that we're not used to experiencing and living in. So in order not to schism and cut ourselves off from the reality that we need to be anchored into in order to live this life, we can pull it in little tidbits. So that's one of the big messages that's coming through. On the flip side, there are others like my dear friend who are getting these smaller increments of big bursts, and she's just processing them so that it doesn't cause her to break down physically, mentally, emotionally. And that is ideal for many people to do. So that's a suggestion to acknowledge, where am I at, right? I want to do this. It's like doing a detox, but if you're detoxing a lot of trauma, and I'm being guided to talk about like a drug addict, when they go into detox, they can almost feel like they're dying, because they are in that energetic sense. So rather than taking it on that way, we can do it a gentle detox, and then kind of explore as we have these little increments of openings. It gives us the ability to integrate it a little bit better. And some people, that's what they're going through right now. Those of you that are experiencing this, it's helpful to be able to understand what we're going through, so that those that are experiencing it maybe in a month from now or 2 months from now, we can go, oh, okay, here's what I did that helped me. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. So I just wanted to kind of share, that's one of the biggest messages that's coming through. So all the stuff that's coming in, all the information that's coming in, I don't share it with everybody, because not all of it is relevant for helping humanity. It's just information about what's going on with technology or political system or whatever. That doesn't help. The knowledge isn't always the most important part of it. Okay, let me rephrase that. The knowledge is not the most important part of it. We have to tune it through our heart in order to interpret and integrate it, so that then we can use the knowledge for good, not just to use knowledge for power. Knowledge is power, but where is the power of compassion and heart and consistently coherent, so we don't burn ourselves out and then literally shut down and cut off our our connection to this infinite source, because it isn't just this. There's always more that can come in, and using the word not getting greedy. So am I wanting to communicate because I'm being greedy about it, and I'm gonna, what's the right word? When you hoard, it's like hoarding all of that information. That isn't serving the highest good for us. That's just hoarding information. So it's fun, and the ego loves it, by the way, because it's fun and it makes us feel like, ooh, I know what's going to happen. I see what's happening in the future. But in reality, that isn't necessarily helping anyone. How do we navigate what's going to happen in the future? How does that look? Can be helpful, but more importantly, how are we looking at that future event? Where are we coming from when this happens? How are we viewing and reacting and taking compassion? What lens are we going to use? Because sometimes just telling people about what's going to happen puts us directly into fear because we haven't resolved or we haven't come into a place where we're able to hold our consistent frequency of, okay, I feel afraid. Let's process that. Where is this coming from? And then able to take action from a space of awareness, right? I am aware, because fear is cutting off the awareness to something, otherwise we wouldn't be feeling it. But it's human. We all feel that from time to time, just not getting lost in translation. Again, we can get wrapped up in it and not even realize that that's what we're doing. I'm coming back to hoarding. Hoarding is another example. Of fear, of lack, right? Of what could happen. But there's a lot that goes around that as well. So much. Okay, I'm running out of space on here. So I wanted to end, let me just pause. Hello, fear. That was where I wanted to go with this. So it's another subject that is going to be coming up more and more and more. From my perspective, I was guided, and I talked about this in the 2 videos ago. Not my wordplay one, but the energy update one, if you feel guided. So I'm just going to be redundant if you did listen to it. Fear, fear, fear. False evidence appearing real. Love that little, is it acronym? Is that what it's called? Love that. It helps to recognize, what am I creating? Why am I feeling this? Is it even real, what I'm feeding this fear into? So we could do a whole video just on that. We could do a whole series of videos just on that. But briefly, I was shown to watch the movie Divergent. And if you guys haven't watched it, it was ironic because I watched it and towards the end, no spoiler alert, but they do something in the movie and I was just like, fear came up, like, ooh, is that really what's going on? But my guidance team is like, pay attention, there's more layers. That's just a story. That's the story for this particular movie. And yes, from one particular perspective, that could be what's going on, but that's not what's important. What's important is, how did this happen in the first place? Where do we give our power away? Where is it that we feel that we're free and we're really not? So there was a lot of things that came up because of that. But essentially, there's a portion where you have to face your fears. And part of it is facing your worst fears. And they play out in a particular reality. And that is the main message that's coming through over and over again. For me, and several of my friends, we've been having them in dream time come up. So whatever our biggest fears are, we're dreaming about them. So, so it's coming up in dream time. So being aware of that, getting up, take a shower, clear it, because you're processing it in dream time. Unless you wake up and it sits with you all day and then you feel afraid because you're thinking, yuck, that was an awful dream. Figure it out, analyze it, or don't. Recognize it, acknowledge it, digest it, integrate it. Doesn't have to be something we focus on. Well, I wonder if that came from a past life. Well, I wonder if this. Yes, sometimes that's helpful to know, but sometimes that is getting lost in translation again. Getting lost in looking for an answer when the answer is, here it is, you're afraid of this, you don't need to be, or you're aware of it, process it, digest it. Sometimes it can be that simple. We overcomplicate things, right? Sometimes. I mean, I never do, but I do all the time. Okay, so this fear is being stirred up. And so what happens is, as our reality restructures itself, as we restructure our reality, anything that we were or are afraid of is going to be brought to the surface. It has to be, from what I've been shown. And that is so challenging. I see it playing out in all areas of life right now, from my perspective. So all of the things that I would be afraid of, it's like, there it is. Here you go. Be aware of it. How can you work through this and not go into denial, right? Which is, again, pulling it back in with the grief. So everything is interconnected. I want to just go end on the note with the bleed through and realities. Some of these fears that are coming up are from past lives, future lives, parallel timelines and whatever, and those timelines are merging and integrating, and or just here now, and it's like Stranger Things, upside down world. It's right there. So we're feeling that energy of these other past version of us or future version of us, and somehow this is all in this soup, interconnecting, interwoven together, and we're picking up on that. But from another perspective, and just more of a linear perspective, we're getting a bleed through from anything that we haven't processed in this lifetime. So that past version of us as a child, we are feeling that now. And it's giving us the gift of unwrapping that gift and recognizing it and looking at it head on and integrating it, not denying that it's there. And that brings me back to the beginning of this video, and I'm gonna run out of time, which is pay attention to what the body is feeling and what the body needs. Adjustments. Adjustments are being made in our reality. Adjustments have to be made in order to tune into who we really are. We are no longer that child. We are no longer that fear. And we no longer are living that life moment where that fear was created, but we're recognizing, oh, okay, it's here. And giving us the opportunity to integrate it. So I'm going to end on that note because I'm running out of time. In love and light, guys. Namaste. I hope this helps anyone, someone. Much love.